Imagine some kid strolling into your driveway and saying, "I'll take your Harley," 'cause his HOA mom told him it's basically his. Would you hand over the keys? My day. Show him where the gate is. It was a slow Saturday in early spring. The kind of morning that smells like fresh-cut grass and coffee. Sunlight slid across the cul-de-sac like warm honey. I was on my porch with a mug, boots up, listening to birds and a distant mower. Peace. Then, this teenager wanders up hat backwards. Hands jammed in his hoodie, stops at my motorcycle, and points like he's ordering from a menu. "I'll take that one." I blinked. "Come again." He jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "Mom said you were giving it to me. She talked to the HOA. You don't really ride it anyway. It's loud. Now, I ride that Harley every weekend. I've ridden it through fog and blistering heat, and after midnights, when my head felt a little too heavy for sleep. I've swapped out the pipes, tuned the carb, polished chrome, till my shoulders ached. It ain't just metal, it's memory and mercy on two wheels." I set the mug down and stood. "Kid, that bike's mine. Your mom's mistaken." He shrugged like it was a math problem he didn't care about. "She's never wrong." "Uh-huh," I said, looking past him. And there she was. Karen. Arms folded. Sunglasses that never come off. The HOA queen, who speaks like every sentence should be engraved on a plaque. She stood at the curb, chin tilted, giving me that little wave. "You give a delivery guy. Thanks for bringing what I ordered." "Morning," I called. "Morning," she answered. Sugar over steel. This is going to be easy if we're all reasonable. Reasonable about what? The motorcycle? She said. It's an eyesore. And the noise carries. The board discussed it. You barely ride. And my son's turning 17 next month. It would be a generous gesture to donate it to him. A neighborly gesture. I laughed, couldn't help it. "Donate to your kid." She nodded like we'd hit the obvious solution. "Exactly. You've lost your mind," I said. Voice flat. Her smile didn't move. But everything behind it did. "If you won't be cooperative, I'll escalate." I watched the teenager roll his eyes, then trudge back to her. They left like royalty who'd been snubbed by a clumsy servant. I figured. Okay. That's the worst of it. A weird morning story. I was wrong. Karen doesn't retreat, she reloads. That afternoon, I wheeled the bike from the garage, helmet clipped to the bars, and went for a loop outside town. Wind in the face. The road humming. A stretch of 2 lanes that felt like a long exhale. When I came back, the sun was leaning west. I parked under the big oak, killed the engine, and felt that living silence you only notice after noise, like the world blinking back to calm. Sirens. 2 police cruisers turned onto the street. Lights spinning. They rolled right into my driveway. Doors opened. 2 officers stepped out mid-40s. Steady. The kind of men who've heard every excuse under the sun. "Sir," the first one said. "Step away from the motorcycle." "Excuse me, step away." "Please." I stepped back. Palms open. "What's this about?" "Report of stolen property," the second officer said, reading from a pad. "A resident alleges you unlawfully took possession of a motorcycle belonging to her minor son." I laughed short, disbelieving. "That's my bike. I've had it for over a decade. Title and registration are inside." Karen materialized at the edge of the lawn like she'd been summoned by the flashing lights. Her son trailed her, arms folded, Mouth, a hard line. There it is, she said, pointing. He promised it to my boy. Then he reneged. Isn't that theft? The first officer looked from her to me. Sir, I never promised anyone anything, I said. The paperwork's in the hall drawer. Please stay here. The second officer said, tell us where. I gave him the drawer and the address on the envelope with my name. Karen leaned in as they passed and whispered, you could have done the right thing. Now the whole neighborhood will know. I bit my tongue. You don't wrestle with a skunk in public. A minute later, the officers came back with my title and registration. Edges frayed from use. My name stamped where names go. It's his, the first officer said. Flat. Karen's smile cracked. He misled my son. She pressed, voice lifting on the last word. That's fraud. The second officer folded the documents and handed them to me. This is a civil matter. If anything, he glanced at me with a look that said, we've been dragged into nonsense. Sorry. They left without so much as a warning. The boy muttered, it's not fair, and followed Karen back across the street. They didn't look back. The oak leaves hissed overhead. The Harley cooled, ticking softly. My coffee on the porch had gone cold. I thought that'd be the end. It wasn't. 3 days later, a letter showed up on my door. HOA letterhead. Notice of violation, community disruption, and failure to comply with neighborhood courtesy standards. It claimed my motorcycle was a nuisance, that I'd made false verbal commitments to transfer it to a minor, and that my hostile demeanor created a toxic environment. I stood there reading it under the porch light, the paper bright and official in my hands. My first instinct was to laugh. My second was to cuss. What I did was sit at the kitchen table and breathe. There's a line between irritation and intimidation. This felt like someone pushing me across it on purpose. I called Mark, an old friend from our veterans group. He works at the state attorney's office case review. Not flashy courtroom stuff. We're not best friends, but we've folded flags together. There's a kind of quiet bond in that. Mark, I said, I need a read. My neighbor's trying to use the HOA to shake me down. He listened as I laid it out the kid in the driveway. The police. The letter. Sounds like she's weaponizing process, he said. That can shade into harassment. Document everything. Write a timeline. If you've got video, grab it. I pulled footage from the doorbell cam, the kid pointing at the bike, saying, Mom said you'd give it to me. I printed stills. I scanned the title and registration. I wrote a statement with timestamps. I made copies of the HOA letter. I slid it all into a folder, thick enough to press flowers. When I walked into the state attorney's office a day later, I felt like a man carrying a toolbox into a house with a broken pipe. The receptionist looked bored until she saw the stack. Mark came out from a side door, shook my hand, took the file, and told me they'd review. A week passed. Karen's blinds fluttered every time I stepped outside. There's people who live to manage other people's business. She's their mayor. Neighbors started glancing at me with that quiet sympathy you give to folks in a storm. A couple of them Janice down the block. Mr. Carter on the corner murmured things like, she's gone too far. And that woman was trouble from day one. Then came the HOA meeting. The community room smelled like cheap carpet and coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A long folding table sat at the front with name placards for the board bill. The president, soft-spoken, reasonable. Denise, who manages the newsletter and bakes cookies with alarming politeness. A couple of others, the type whose smiles look carved. Karen sat near the front, her son beside her, pouting like he'd been grounded from life. She was in full regalia, crisp blouse, perfect posture, binder fat, with printouts. I took a seat in the second row with my folder on my lap. Back straight, breath slow. Bill tapped a gavel lightly. New business. Karen's hand shot up like a flag in a storm. I'd like to address Mr. Owens and his ongoing violations. Bill sighed the way a man sighs when he knows what's coming. Proceed. She stood and turned to the room. Our community has standards. Noise. Aesthetics. Neighborly behavior. For months now, Mr. Owens' motorcycle has disturbed the peace. He promised, verbally, to donate the motorcycle to my son, then refused, which has caused emotional distress. He has been hostile during my attempts to mediate. She let the word mediate hang like a golden ribbon. A couple of people nodded reflexively. A couple more rolled their eyes. Bill looked at me. Mr. Owens' eyes stood. I never promised anything to anyone. I set my folder on the table and opened it. I have video from my doorbell cam, her son telling me, Mom said you'd give it to me. I have the police report with officers confirming the bike is mine. I have the title, registration, and a timeline of events. I also have a copy of the notice of violation that claims I made a false agreement. That claim is false. I handed copies across. Bill adjusted his glasses and skimmed. Denise leaned in, frowning. The room moved in the way rooms move when words start to redecorate assumptions. Karen stood straighter. He's cherry-picking. He creates a hostile environment. He revs that engine at inappropriate hours. I ride on weekends. I said, between late morning and early evening. Never before sunrise. Never late at night. That's courtesy. Also, the rules state no prolonged noise at unreasonable hours. I follow that. Denise flipped a page. It says, unreasonable hours are evenings and nights. Saturday afternoons are not included. Karen's jaw tensed. We can interpret no. Bill said gently. We can apply. A quiet laugh rippled from the back row. I kept my voice steady. I don't want drama. I want neighborly. But neighborly isn't giving away personal property because someone thinks it would be generous. Neighborly means respecting boundaries. Her son muttered too loud not to hear, he promised. Karen squeezed his knee to hush him. Bill set the papers down. We'll need to review these materials. For now. I move that any enforcement action be paused pending review. The motion carried with hands raised around Karen, like small flags giving up. She stayed still for a beat, then sat. On my way out, a couple of neighbors touched my shoulder. You did right, Janice said. Her smile, small and soft. I'm tired of her scaring people. Mr. Carter grunted. About time someone told her no. I slept light that week. Every time an engine rumbled down the street, I half expected another patrol car. Instead, a letter arrived on thick paper with a law firm's name I recognized from billboards. Cease and desist. It began. The letter claimed I'd emotionally misled a minor, caused mental distress, and demanded I transfer the motorcycle as restitution. If not, I should prepare for civil action. I felt my pulse climb. Not fear. Exactly, more like a hot flare in the chest. I called Mark. Read the letter out loud. He snorted. Bluff. They're trying to spook you. Given your evidence and the paused enforcement, this is posturing. Respond formally. Keep it clean. No heat. I called a lawyer from our veteran circle. A calm man with a voice like a worn leather chair. We drafted a response with copies of the title, the police acknowledgement, The HOA pause. My timeline. He added a paragraph about harassment and misuse of process. He sent it certified. Strange thing happened. Silence. No more knocks. No more letters. Karen's blinds still twitched. But her posture around the neighborhood changed tense. Brittle. Like a statue of herself. One gust from cracking. I kept to my routines. Coffee. On the porch. Rides on weekends. A wave to neighbors. I mean, I ain't a saint. But I try to be steady. There's people who go looking for fights 'cause it makes them feel important. I've had enough fights. Then, small stories started to drift my way as folks got brave enough to share. A paint color Karen said was unauthorized, even though it matched the approved palette. Just a slightly warmer shade. A ramp for an elderly neighbor that she called aesthetic clutter until a crowd shut her down. A service dog she tried to define as a pet in order to limit yard time. When you stack those stories, you see a pattern, not rules. Control. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed. Folks stood along the walls. The air had that electric weight rooms get when people have decided quietly, firmly, to be done with something. Bill tapped his gavel. New business, Janice Rose. Paper. Trembling just enough to show how much courage costs. I have a petition to remove Karen from the board for misuse of authority and harassment. She glanced at me. Then back at the room. We believe the complaint process was used to target neighbors personally. Karen wasn't there. A chair with her name placard sat empty, like an accusation with no one to hear it. Bill read the petition. Counted signatures. Conferred with Denise. Then he spoke the words I'd been hoping to hear since the kid pointed at my bike. The petition meets requirements. The vote is aye. Hands went up, most of them. Enough. Aye carries. Bill said. Effective immediately. The room didn't cheer. It breathed. Relief is a quiet thing when it arrives, honest. I walked home under a sky turning violet. The air smelling like cut grass in evening. I sat with my coffee the second cup and listened to crickets and a far-off dog. I thought about what we tolerate because we want peace. And what happens when peace is just silence enforced by someone else's threat? You might be thinking, okay, the big drama ended, but life moves in ripples. The first ripple felt like normal neighbors waving with both hands instead of just their chin. Kids playing chalk games in driveways without someone stomping over to critique the shade of blue. The second ripple was paperwork. The board sent out an updated How Complaints worksheet that required evidence before a warning. Not just feelings. Actual proof. I appreciated that. I also knew Karen wasn't the kind to disappear. She went quiet. But not, gone. A month later, I found a sticky note on my mailbox that read, "Still waiting for you to do the right thing." No signature. But her handwriting has this hard, right-leaning tilt, like the letters are marching. I peeled it off and slid it into a folder. Not because it rattled me, because paper tells stories. Courts understand. The next Saturday, I rolled the Harley out for a tune-up day. Oil change. Chain tension. A slow wipe of the tank till my hand saw itself in the paint. Sun warmed my neck. I had blues on a small speaker. Low enough to be polite. After a while, the teenage boy ambled across the street. He hovered at the edge of the driveway like a cat that wants to come in but won't admit it. Need something? I asked. Gentle. He swallowed. It is a nice bike. It is. I agreed. My birthday's in a couple weeks. 17. He nodded. I set the rag down. Listen. Kid. Your mom told you a story that ain't true. I didn't promise you anything. But if you want to learn about bikes like Tools. Safety. How engines breathe. I can show you how to swap out plugs or change oil. That's free. Knowledge don't cost pride. He scuffed his shoe. She said, you were selfish. Maybe. I said. A small smile. I'm selfish about safety, too. You ever been on a bike? Only once. He said. Eyes kindling. Helmet. He shook his head. Then I ain't taking you on mine. But you can stand here and watch the work if you want. He hung around for an hour, asked a few shy questions, smiled without looking at me. When he left, he said, thanks. I heard Karen's screen door slam as he crossed the yard. Her voice, sharp, floated on the air, then cut off. He didn't come back. I'll tell you something. Maybe obvious people who crave control often recruit other people to feel important. If you're young, that pull is strong. You want to belong, even if you belong to the wrong thing. 2 weeks after his birthday, I saw him on the curb with a new bicycle pedal kind. Bright red. He looked almost relieved. He waved at me when no one was watching. I wish that was the last of it. But one more ripple rolled in. A letter. Not from a law firm this time. From Karen herself. 3 full pages. Single-spaced. With phrases like community fabric and collective sacrifice. Somewhere around paragraph 6, she wrote, if a person cares more about his personal indulgence than the emotional well-being of a child, then what are we, as a neighborhood, supposed to think? I didn't respond. I filed it. Sometimes the strongest no is no reply at all. Summer came. The HOA held a barbecue in the park by the pond. Kids ran with water guns. Someone played classic rock from a Bluetooth speaker. Bill flipped burgers with that concentration men get when they've decided this is how they'll help. I brought a cooler. People laughed. The sky was one wide, forgiving blue. Karen showed up halfway through with a casserole and sunglasses. She moved like a person carrying a fragile story about herself that she refuses to set down. A hush followed her. She put the dish on the table and stood there like she expected applause. None came. Denise said, thank you. And that was that. Janice caught my eye, then nudged me toward the far end of the table. Bill wants to talk, she said. Bill wiped his hands. We're updating noise guidelines. He told me not to target you, to name what already works. Daytime hours for small engines. The common sense stuff. Fine by me, I said. He lowered his voice. And thank you. You handled things steady. I shrugged. I kept receipts. I stayed polite. I ain't perfect, but I try. He smiled. That's about the best any of us do. Across the lawn, Karen cornered Denise near the lemonade. Her hands cut the air. Denise's face stayed calm. A lake with wind skipping over it. After a minute, Karen walked away. Jaw tight. Casserole untouched. Sometimes there is no grand apology. Sometimes what you get is a boundary that holds. And you have to let that be enough. Now, let me tell you what the road feels like when the weather breaks just right. You roll out before noon. Traffic light. A little heat rising off the asphalt, like the earth's busy breathing. The Harley settles into that low, friendly rumble that says, we're going, but we got time. Trees flicker shade like a long blink. You take the back way past the feed store and the white fenced pastures. And suddenly, the world remembers. It's big and your worries ain't. I ride for the same reason some folks fish, or sit quietly with a puzzle, 'cause moving my hands while my mind gets simple is a kind of prayer. And, when I come back to the cul-de-sac, I'm easier. My voice is softer. My patience is longer. One Saturday, I returned from a long loop to see Mr. Carter struggling with a busted sprinkler head. Water shot sideways like a stubborn fountain. I parked the bike, grabbed a wrench, and walked over. We knelt in the grass, mud swallowing our knees. Two men laughing at water, trying to drown our shoes. There's people who'd call the HOA about this puddle. He joked. We both knew who he meant, after we patched it. He stood with a groan that sounded like a door opening in winter. You did this neighborhood a service, son, he said. Ain't about the motorcycle. It's about someone finally saying enough. I went home and thought about that. In a way, Karen taught us something by pushing too far. She taught us where our line actually is. A letter arrived the following week, this time from the HOA. Plain envelope. Inside, a short apology. Based on review, prior notice of violation was issued in error. We regret any stress caused. That was it. No flowery language. No excuses. The best kind of apology is a clean one. I folded it back into the envelope and slid it into the folder with everything else. Then, I did something I hadn't done in months. I took the bike for a short evening spin with no tightness in my shoulders at all. On my way out of the neighborhood, I passed Karen's house. Curtains stirred. No one waved. The boy sat on the porch steps, head down, fiddling with a chain on his wrist. I slowed, lifted a couple fingers off the bar. Just a hello. He didn't wave back, but he looked up. That's enough for now, I thought. You think you'll celebrate big when the trouble lifts. But most victories taste like quiet. Fall came. Leaves turned the color of penny copper. I put a flannel over a t-shirt and felt the season change in my bones like an old door settling back into its frame. One Sunday afternoon, Bill knocked. He asked if I'd serve on a small committee to rewrite a few sections of the bylaws complaints. Accommodations. Noise language. Stuff folks always argue about. I'm no politician. I told him. Good. He said. We've had enough of those. We met in the community room with coffee and muffins. Denise took notes in tidy rows. Janice brought a tin of cookies that tasted like a childhood you actually liked. We went line by line. We argued a little. We laughed a lot. We added a sentence requiring specific evidence before warnings. We clarified that unreasonable hours means what it says. We made a spot for reasonable accommodations that can override aesthetics when life actually needs it. Everything ordinary is built out of these small, stubborn decisions by people who are tired of nonsense. You know, at the final meeting to vote on changes, folks filled every chair. Karen came, too. She sat near the exit and wore a bright scarf like a flag of herself. When Bill asked if there was any discussion, she raised her hand. The room went still. Not fearful this time, curious. I object, she said. This is the path to chaos. If we let feelings and subjective evidence dictate rules, we will have no guardrails. Denise answered with a voice as steady as a metronome. We are not centering feelings. We are clarifying facts. We are requiring evidence before enforcement. Karen's lips thinned. And what, when the evidence is subtle? When a person makes this street unlivable in ways you can't capture on paper? Bill's gaze moved gently from her to the crowd. Then we talk. Neighbor to neighbor. Like adults. Karen looked at me. I kept my face calm. She looked away first. The vote passed nearly unanimous. I signed as a witness, just a name at the bottom of a page. But the pen felt heavy in a good way. Winter slid in. More rain than snow. The air turned thin and clean. I rode less because wet roads ask too much faith. But I kept the engine warm once a week. Some evenings I'd sit in the garage with the heater buzzing, polishing chrome while the radio murmured oldies. That garage smells like oil and pine from the stud walls. And, yeah, a little like stubbornness. Every now and then, I'd catch movement through the window, Karen walking her dog along the far sidewalk, choosing the route that kept the most distance. She didn't glare anymore. She just looked smaller. Not because she was less, because her shadow wasn't stretched across everyone's yard. One rainy Saturday, the boy knocked. I opened the door to find him soaked, hoodie plastered to his head, eyes bright and urgent. "Can I borrow your jack?" he asked. My bike chain snapped, and the wheels, jammed. "Come on," I said, and grabbed tools. We worked under my carport, rain drumming the roof like a heart applause. His hands were clumsy at first, then hungry for the right moves. We got the wheel free, threaded the chain, tightened bolts, spun it. The machine smiled back with that clean, round hum. "Thanks," he said, a little breathless. I nodded. "You did most of it." He hesitated. Looked like the words had to sneak past a guard. "Mom said I shouldn't come here. You're always safe asking for help that keeps you safe," I said. "Tools beat rumors." He half laughed. "She thinks you hate us." "I don't," I said. "I just like my stuff to stay my stuff." He smiled. "Fair." As he walked away, Karen stood near their porch, arms folded, face unreadable. The boy handed her a grocery bag he'd left on my step, a pound cake wrapped in plastic. He must have picked it up on his way back. She looked at the bag, then across the street at me. For a second, the mask slipped, and I saw something like tiredness. Then, the mask came back. She turned. The door closed. Spring returned like forgiveness. Birds showed up with more noise than manners. The road dried. I took a first-day warm ride and waved at everyone like a man who decided to spend his hellos freely. And, it felt right. One evening, I got home to find an envelope on my porch. Inside a note in clean block letters. "Thank you for helping my son, K." No flourish. No faux apology. Just that. I put it in the folder, not because I needed proof, but because it reminded me that people turn in small degrees, not dramatic spins. The folder, by the way, had grown fat copies of the old violation, the apology, the updated rules, my timeline, the law firm bluff, the sticky note, the thank you. I kept it all, not out of spite, out of respect for the story. Paper, like I said, is how messy life tells the truth when memory's tempted to add decorations. I don't know if you've ever fought a battle that started as a joke and kept escalating till your chest buzzed like you'd swallowed a hornet. But coming out the other side, you learn a couple things that ain't fancy. First, calm wins more rounds than loud. Second, evidence beats drama. Third, neighbors are braver than they think once someone cracks the door. And fourth, this one took me longer. Some folks ain't evil. They're afraid of a world they can't control, and they try to make it smaller by making you smaller. You don't fix that with rage. You fix it with boundaries wide enough to stand inside without apology. So where did everything land? Pretty simple. Really. I still have my Harley. Still park it under the big oak. Still ride on weekends, between late morning and early evening. Because courtesy ain't weakness. The bike sounds like thunder, mumbling to itself, steady, low, alive. Karen is off the board. She walks her dog. She bakes for the holiday potluck with a recipe folks actually like. She does not manage the color of your front door or the angle of your lawn chairs from the sidewalk. If she tries to, people smile and say, "No. Thanks." Boundaries built themselves into muscle memory. The boy, he heads out each morning with his backpack slung and his hair finally forward instead of hiding his eyes. Last week, he waved like he meant it. The wave landed. Funny how a small thing can feel like a page turning. The HOA. It got better not by magic, but by minutes. Meetings where folks speak plain. Rules that say what they mean. A president who's steady. A secretary who writes clearly. Neighbors who back each other when something gets weird. That's how you keep a street livable. You don't need perfection. You need people who will show up with a wrench when the water shoots sideways. And me, I learned to stand up without standing on anybody. I learned that no can be said quiet and still be final. I learned that sometimes the wind at your back is just you finally letting go of the worry that you owe your peace to somebody else's permission. If you're listening to this, and you've got your own HOA story, if someone tried to bully you with bylaws or make your porch feel like a courtroom, hear me document everything. Keep your voice calm. Talk to your neighbors. And don't hand over what's yours, 'cause somebody stamps their foot and calls it community. Communities, what we do for each other. Not what one person makes everybody do for them. I still start most mornings on the porch. Coffee steaming. Sunlight easing over asphalt like a soft promise. Some days I hear a mower. Some days a dog. Some days the simple hush of a day, not asking for anything. When I roll the bike out and the engine wakes, I feel that old gratitude. The kind that pulls your shoulders down and your mouth up. I check the time. Nod to the clock. Keep within courtesy. Thumb the starter. And let the road open like it always does. Honest. Wide. Unafraid. One last thing, 'cause folks ask, do I regret staying? Nope. This is my street. 2. My oak. My porch. My ugly boot mat that my sister says looks like it came from a gas station in 1980-something. My neighbors who bring over peach cobbler that tastes like August. My headache when leaves clog the gutter. My peace when stars finally pop out like nails of light on a big dartboard overhead. And yeah, my motorcycle. Mine to keep. Mine to ride. Mine to tuck in at night like a shiny, stubborn friend who's seen me through more than I can say without sounding sappy. I mean, sorry, there's days I talk to that machine like it can hear. Maybe it can. Maybe it's just me hearing myself come back around to center. Either way, I'm good. And if the next Karen lifts her sunglasses and tries the old tricks, the folder's thick. The neighbors are ready. And my no is already set inside me before my mouth opens. That's how you keep your life yours. What would you do here? Anyone else had a HOA? Karen tried to snatch. What's yours? Your bike. Your yard. Your porch swing. Even your mailbox color. Drop your story in the comments. I'm gonna grab a ride while the sun's still friendly. See y'all on the road.